آریانا افغانستان یگانه شبکه تلویزیونی ملی افغانها در خارج از کشور.
توانا بود ارکی دانا بود، ز دانش دل پیر برنا بود. دلای آبخونگی خدای پنامه گران و قدرمن دوستانو، سلام علیکم. هیله چرا خوشحال هوارا مسیحی او دینن روزه ده پوهن رنا ده پخبرونه دیر خیر اغلاست. زی مریم اسماعیل ارسلایم او ده اخبرونه دست ده آریانا افغانستان ده نریواله شبکیز خبرنده کم. خدای دیوکری چه ده نن روزه ده پوهن رنا ده اخبرونه معلومات هم استاسو ده استفاده وارسیگی. بینندگان عزیز و ارجمند برنامه دانش روشنایی است. بارزوی صحت و سلامت شما. برنامه امروز آغاز میکنیم. امیدوارم شاد و صحتمند باشین و هفته خوش و پرثمره در هر گوشه و کنار جهان که هستین با عزیزانتان به خوشی و آرامش سپری کرده باشین و باز هم خوشحال هستم که در برابر شما عزیزان قرار دارم. امیدوارم که با محتویات و موضوع برنامه امروز ما توجه خاص بپردازین. موضوع برنامه امروز ما موضوع بسیار مهم برای همه ما شما در سراسر جهان است، نه تنها برای هموطنان عزیز ما در ایالات متحده آمریکا هستند و مخصوصا برای هموطنان ما که در داخل افغانستان هم است، برای زنها هم، برای پالیسی های سیاسی افغانستان هم تاثیرات زیاده داره برنامه امروز. و دوستان عزیز ارجمند، البته ما شما وقتی که در هر جای دنیا زندگی میکنیم، وقتی که در خارج از وطن هستیم، هم ما باید وظیفه شهروندی و وظیفه و حقوق شهروندی و مدنی خود باید بدانیم و بجا کنیم. و در مملکت میزبانی که هستیم ما آگاه باشیم که چی نوع حق و حقوق داریم و چی کرده میتونیم. آیا ما شما هم آواز داریم و یا نداریم؟ در کدام نوع تصامیم ما میتونیم که حصه بگیریم؟ و این چیزایی است که ما باید همیشه در موردش آگاهی داشته باشیم. نه تنها آگاهی داشته باشیم بلکه عمل کنیم، بلکه در ساحه عمل هم پا بگذاریم و از امو حقوقی که داریم استفاده کنیم. مثلا حق رای دادن یک حق مسلم هر شهروند و یا سیتیزن در ایالات متحده آمریکا است. و روز 3 نوامبر که البته 15 روز بعد از یک الکشن و یا انتخابات است که در تاریخ دنیا شاید بی‌نظیر بوده باشه، اثراتش نتیجهش برای همه ما شما بسیار ضرور و مهم است که ما باید آگاه باشیم و باید از حقوق شهروندی خود استفاده کنیم و چیزی را که در موردش نمیدونیم باید بدانیم. رای دادن البته تنهایی نیست که ما برای رؤسای جمهور منتخب ما رای بدهیم، بلکه موضوعات دیگه در سطح ایالتی که مربوط به ایالتی که ما شما زندگی میکنیم مهم است تصمیم بگیریم که کی گورنر ما باشه، کی کانگرسمن ما باشه و های موضوعات است که ما شما باید در مورد هر یکی از اشخاص آگاهی داشته باشیم و باید کورکورانه فکر نکنیم. و همچنان یک تعداد معدود از هموطنان ما را متاسفانه شنیدیم که امسال میخواین که حق رای دادن خود به اصطلاح اصول اندازن، به خاطر که با یکی از رؤسای جمهوری که نامزد هستند با هیچ کدامشان اینا موافقت ندارن. و وقتی که شما مثلا از فرض کنید از آقای ترامپ خوشتان نمیاد و شما میگین که من هیچ در مورد آقای بایدن هم بسیاری چیزا شما را بعضی چیزا خوشتن نمیاد، از اون لحاظ نمیخواین رای بدین. وقتی که شما رای نمیتین در حقیقت شما برای کسی که مثلا آقای ترامپ مخالفش هستین او را برنده میسازین وقتی که شما رای نمیتین. این موضوعات است که ما شما باید در موردش آگاهی خود بیشتر بسازیم. باید کوشش کنیم که با مسئولیت تصمیم بگیریم که آیا چی به نفع عمومی به سطح که به تمام هموطنان ما که در ایالات متحده آمریکا هستند، به تمام مردم و همچنان به تاثیراتش بالای مملکت ما چی است که به کدام کاندید ما رای میدیم. این چیزهاییست که باید ما در این مورد آگاهی خود زیاد بسازیم و یک تصمیم بگیریم که تنها بر نفع شخصی خود ما نباشه بلکه برای منفعت عام باشه و نباید بی‌تفاوت بنشینیم و هر کدام ما بگیم که خب ما یک نفر هستم رای نمیدیم. هر کدام ما اگر امی تصمیم امی مفکوره و یا اتیتود داشته باشیم و بی‌تفاوت بنشینیم پس نتیجه از اون ناگوار می باشه. خب یک مهمان بسیار گرامی و عالی قدر در برنامه داریم، جوانی که بسیار فوق العاده در این قسمت سطح آگاهیشان بلند است و تجربه دارن. ما از اونا امروز دفتنی هم چون مهمان خودم متاسفانه کنسل کردن و دفتن امروز صبح ما از این مهمان عزیز و گرانقدر دعوت کردم و دعوت من لبیک گفتم و بسیار زیاد خوشحال هستم که امروز با ما هستن و معرفی مختصرشان میپردازم. آقای آرس ترین که مشاور ارشد سیاست در دفتر حقوقی مدنی وزارت امنیت داخل است و یا ای که سینیر پالیسی ادوایزر در دپارتمنت هوملند سکیوریتی در دفتر سیویل رایتس اند سیویل لیبرتیز و همچنان آقای ترین قبلا به عنوان مدیر دفتر MPAC در واشنگتن دی سی ایفای وظیفه می کرد و در اردو سمت آژانس های مختلف از جمله قصر سفید، وزارت عدلیه، امنیت ملی و دفاتر کانگرس در کپیتال هیل درگیر و مشاجره کرده است و بیش از 30 مقاله های پلیسی با موضوعات از جمله امنیت ملی، حقوق شهروندی، آزادی های مدنی، آزادی های مذهبی، مهاجرت و مشارکت مدنی تهیه کرده است. آقای ترین به طور منظم در برنامه‌های تلویزیونی خبری از جمله فاکس نیوز، MSNBC، CNN، BBC و BBC حضور داشته و به طور منظم در نشریات ملی و بین المللی مانند روزنامه‌های واشنگتن، LA تایمز، کریستین ساینس مانیتورز، الجزیره نوشته و در جمله 3 جوان برجسته امریکایی توسط آقای اوباما رئیس جمهور اسبق ایالات متحده امریکا در یک بحث مهم و بالخصوص در مورد نوع مسائل سیاسی عمومی فراخوانده شد و رئیس جمهور اوباما چندین بار به طور خاص با آقای ترین در مورد سیاست‌های مربوط به امنیت ملی، خشونت ایدئولوژیک، جامعه مسلمانان امریکا و تعاملات مدنی گفتگو کردند و صحبت کردند. و همچنان آقای ترین نویسنده کتاب به نام معرفی با امریکای مسلمان یا Entry to Muslim America و نویسنده مشترک با یا کو-آتر در کتاب بازنگری در خط سرخ، آزادی بیان، آزادی دین و تغییرات اجتماعی و یا Rethinking the Red Line، Free Speech, Religious Freedom and Social Change می باشد. و آقای ترین آل خوش آمدید میگیم و خوشحال هستم که محترم آقای ترین در فرصت بسیار کوتاه و وقت بسیار کم دعوت ما را پذیرفتن. آقای ترین سلام به شما، خوش آمدین.
سلام علیکم، چطور هستین مریم جان؟
زنده باشین. بسیار زیاد تشکر که من شما دفعتاً از شما امروز صبح خواهش کردم که بیاین و شما قبول کردین. بسیار زیاد لطف کردین، بسیار سخاوت کردین. تشکر از لطفتان.
خواهش میکنم، شما مهربان هستین. هرچی که بتونم که شما در پروگرام کمک کنم و که شما باشم برای من افتخار است. بسیار زیاد
تشکر. جوانای مثل شما قابل افتخار همه ماستین و بسیار جای شکر است که شما را داریم. خب آقای ترین اگر لطف کنین در قسمت اول دوستای عزیز و ارجمند، چون آقای ترین شما به امریکا تولد شدین؟
ما در افغانستان تولد شدیم، مگر 5 ساله بودیم که ما از
5 سال
افغانستان
خب بسیار
برآمدیم.
خورد بودین، بسیار
مهاجر شدیم، اول پاکستان بودیم، باز بعد از پاکستان امریکا آمدیم. از سن 7 سالگی ما در امریکا زندگی میکنیم
و از 5 سالگی از افغانستان خارج شد. بسیار تشکر. دلیل
بله.
پرسان کردم است که بیننده های ما درک کنن که بعضی جای شما مجبور هستین که از لغات انگلیسی استفاده کنین و بعضی وقت حتی هر قدر که ما فصاحت زبان هم داشته باشیم در بسیاری موضوعات،
بله
وقتی که ما خالص دری یا پشتو صحبت میکنیم ما معنای موضوع از بین میره. به خاطر ما میخواستم که بر بیننده های ما روشن شود که شما بسیار طفولیت اینجا آمدین و همچنین بعضی موضوعات مجبور هستین که یعنی ضرورت است که به انگلیسی بعضی چیزا رو صحبت کنین و این چون موضوع برنامه امروز ما مخصوصا برای ارتباط میگیره با هموطنان ما که در داخل ایالات متحده امریکا هستند، ولی اثر و نتیجهش بالای همه هموطنان ما در هر جایی که هستن می باشه، مخصوصا در داخل کشور و بالای پالیسی خارجی بر تمام دنیا تاثیر داره. خب از اون لحاظ یعنی که هموطنان عزیز ما که در ایالات متحده امریکا هستن و حق رای دادن دارن، انشالله که صحبت هایی که به انگلیسی هم صورت میگیره شما حتما از اون درک می داشته باشین. خب آقای ترین، اگر لطف کنین بگوین که در روند مدنی و سیاسی برای افغان‌های مقیم امریکا حصه گرفتن چرا مهم است؟ و یا اینکه
بسیار تشکر. برای دوم بسیار تشکر مریم جان. Thank you so much for having me in your program. I've heard so many wonderful things about you and your program and the guests that you have on here. So I'm absolutely honored to be with you and all of our Binawandari Aziz all over the world, especially our Afghan Americans. The importance of being involved in the civic and political process in the United States is extremely something that we have to extremely think about because as Afghan Americans, we live in this society. It is a democratic society. We contribute every day to the society. So we pay taxes to the society. We are part of how the society works. We give back. We are part of the civil society. We are engineers and doctors and professors and small business owners. We contribute to making America a better place, and we contribute to making America actually run. And so on a daily basis, we are contributing to the broader American mosaic and society. So if we do that naturally, then it's important to also have a deliberate civic and political engagement, because if we're not around the table, then someone else will make those decisions for us. There's a saying that actually belongs to Malcolm X, the great civil rights leader of the 1960s, who said, if you're not around the table, you will be on the menu. Yeah. And unfortunately, as Afghan Americans and as Afghans, this has happened to us so much. There are decisions made about Afghanistan. There's decisions made about our rights on immigration issues, women's rights, the issues of civil rights, refugees. These decisions are made about us, but we are not around the table to help shape those decisions and actually help policymakers and leaders make informed decisions. And so if you see, for the past 20 years, America has been engaged in Afghanistan. And you will not see many Afghan Americans who are around the table to help shape those policies. And so you're going to have mistakes that will be made. And then also, if you look at domestic policy, our kids go to public schools. Our children go to universities. We drive on the roads that are around us. And we have a voice in all of that. We can be on school boards. We can be on parent-teacher associations. We can engage our local city councils. Those are very important decisions that are made about us in our daily lives. If we are engaged at the civic and political level, we can actually have an effect and make change on certain issues. So that's why it's so important. I think one of the things that makes America unique, and the privilege that we have as being Afghan Americans, is that we have a voice. Whether, even if it's a small voice, we have a voice. And I think it's important for us to use that voice and to impact the society around us.
That's very true دوست عزیز. واقعا که اگر ما خود ما در قسمت تصمیم گرفتن اصلا نگیریم و خود ما این تصمیم نگیریم که کی رو انتخاب میکنیم، چی رو انتخاب میکنیم، قسمی که آقای ترین گفتن اگر ما منیو رو انتخاب نکنیم در منیو می باشیم. پس واقعا که یعنی با عباره دیگه تاثیر منفی سر خودمون می داشته باشه. می که ما غفلت کنیم و تصمیم نگیریم، خود ما در این تصمیم خود داخل نسازیم، با نقص و ضرر خود ما تمام میشه. باید امی فرصتی که با ما داده شده از این استفاده کنیم، از این حق رای دادن که داریم باید استفاده کنیم. تشکر آقای ترین. حالا اگر لطف کنین بگوین که آیا در واقع افغان‌های مقیم امریکا میتونن که از طریق مشارکت مدنی و سیاسی به جامعه تاثیر بگذارند؟
بله، چرا نه؟ That's definitely something that is possible. Afghan Americans can have a major impact on society. One thing about American society, if you study American history, you realize that every group of immigrants, every community that comes to this country, they work hard first to establish themselves economically, to make sure that they have financial stability, and then they move from the financial stability to have social impact. Every community, Italian Americans, Irish Americans, Jewish Americans, African Americans, Japanese Americans, this has been part of the history of America. You come to this land, you work hard, you actually struggle. Every society or every community has struggled in this country, but eventually you settle and then you're able to have an impact. And I think that's what our parents did, at least for me, when I look at how my parents worked really hard to work, to establish their life, to have financial stability after they were refugees and immigrants. The second and third and fourth generation then can start having a broader impact. But now we're still in the first and second generation of Afghan Americans. We can have an impact. Our vote, number one, is a simple impact that we can do. Whether we vote for our local council member, our congressperson, man or woman, if we vote for our senator, up all the way to the presidency. That is one way we can have an impact. Number two, we are able to be engaged as a community. We need to build institutions. If you build institutions that are strong, then you can have an impact on society. For instance, I always give the example, in terms of Afghan Americans, the rough estimates of how many Afghans are in the United States of America is about anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million. That is the rough estimate. We don't know exact numbers, but we know that we have a decent sized community who are now doing well, who have established themselves. If we build institutions that we have at the local level, we've built community centers, we've built cultural centers, we've built women's groups, we've built religious groups, and they are now impacting society. If we can expand that and actually think about how do we now impact American-Afghan relations? We have lawyers, we have engineers, we have policymakers, we have people like Dr. Nadia Hashimi, who ran for Congress, and who was almost elected to Congress, but now she sits on her local council and is actually impacting policy at the local level. We have young people who were running for city council. We have Aisha Wahab, who is on the Hayward City Council in Hayward, California, who is actually impacting, rental prices for young people, access to healthcare for senior citizens. If we actually try to get involved, we can have an impact because we've seen it. We've seen our parents do it. We've seen now young people do it. So it's something that we are able to do as long as we put in effort. But it requires institution building. It requires for us to be able to come together on some shared principles and shared values, and leave some of the issues of whether it be ethnic or religious differences that we might have had, but come together on values of certain values of human rights, women's rights, rights of minorities. These are things that we can all agree on and make sure that we build institutions around those principles.
واقعا راستی یعنی میتونیم، چرا نمیتونیم اثرگذار باشیم؟ قسمی که آقای ترین گفتن مثالای بسیار خوبی که ما داریم، دکتر نادیه هاشمی که البته 2 هفته بعد در با آقای ترین باز هم در برنامه ما می باشند، در اول نوامبر در یک پنل می باشند، و خانم عایشه وهاب که خانم بسیار جوانی هستند. اینا مثالای بسیار خوبی هستند که ما یعنی اتو نیست که بگیم برای ما آواز نداریم، ما نمیتونیم چانس داشته باشیم. اگر ما باعث یک کمیونیتی و جامعه افغانی خود منیس افغان ها اما یک جای باشیم و تمام اختلافات خود به کنار بگذاریم، چه از نگاه قومی و نژادی و زبانی باشه، چه از نگاه مذهبی باشه، همشه به کنار بگذاریم و با روی یک هدف مشترک همه ما دست به دست هم بدهیم، کار کنیم و یک تصمیم بگیریم و یک برای آینده خود ما میتونیم که همه ما یک جا دست به دست هم داده میتونیم تصمیم خوب بگیریم و میتونیم که دمی رایگیری هم یک سهم بسیار خوب داشته باشیم و میتونیم که نتیجه زیرا به مو افکار آرایی که داریم که به نفع منفعت عامه باشه، ما یعنی میتونیم نتیجه را به نفع خود بسازیم. اگر همه ما دست به دست هم باعث افغان ها یک جا باشیم و تعداد افغان های ما را به صورت مشخص در ایالات متحده امریکا نمیفهم که چی تعداد هستیم، اما هر کدام ما که عقل رای دادن داریم، اگر با یک مفکوری خوب و مشترک یک جا شویم، ما بسیار یک تغییر بزرگی را میتونیم که ایجاد کنیم. گفته آقای ترین یعنی مثال بسیار خوب ما هم داریم. خب آقای ترین، اگر لطف کنین که بگوین که بسیاری از سطوح دولت در ایالات متحده امریکا وجود داره، یا so many levels of government، در کدام عرصه ها باید مردم حصه بگیرن و در کجا اینا شاید که مؤثر باشند؟
Vale. So like you mentioned, Mariam Jan, there are various layers of government in the United States, and that actually works to our benefit. We don't just have one national federal government, but we have federal government, we have state government, and then we have local governments. The local governments are and elections are something that people don't think about a lot, but they actually have a real life impact. For instance, let's take a very specific example. Every county and city tends to have something called school boards. These are school boards where people are elected. The majority of the time, they're elected, and they actually have an impact on the curriculum for our children's schools. They have an impact on, how much funding, how much money goes to these schools, the type of education our children have, what is the curriculum and what do they learn, what are some of the standards at the state and local level. And that is a huge impact for our children in our lives. And, sometimes most Afghan American children go to public schools. I went to public school. And that education has a major impact on our lives. We can get involved. We can get involved in those school boards. We can get involved in the local city councils, where the decisions about where our local taxes go, how much for instance, if we have community centers or religious institutions, what type of zoning laws those have impact on us. What type of roads that we have that are given to us. Those we can get involved at that very basic level. We can have a major impact, and then of course at the state and federal level, there's also opportunities. For instance, we just happen to have our census at the every 10 years. The U.S. has a census where we count the number of citizens and their background and where they live in a demographics and population. We just had our census that passed. If Afghan Americans were organized, if we were organized as a group, and hopefully for the next census in 10 years, we are able to do this as institutions, we can then lobby to ensure that Afghan Americans are considered a ethnic group in the census. And then we get funding, and our community is recognized at the federal level through that census. For instance, Arab Americans are now counted as part of the census. That is something that they were able to work together on. They built institutions, and they were able to have being an Arab American as part of the census and counted. And so there are opportunities for us to get, of course, at the federal and local level to get help and funding. But also, we have a special relationship with the federal government of the United States. America, whether we think it's positive or negative, has been involved in Afghanistan for almost 20 years now. And America has spent a lot of money in that process. Over $2 trillion has been spent one way or another, whether it's through defense or development or whatever it may be in Afghanistan. And being in Washington, I've seen that we don't have a lot of Afghan American institutions that are able to help direct that aid that goes into Afghanistan, whether direct or policy towards Afghanistan. Right now, America is making a major decision on what to do in the next step in Afghanistan. There's the peace process, the troop withdrawal back to the United States. And there are not a lot of Afghan American institutions that have a voice in that process. We're working with the Biden campaign now, the Biden and Harris campaign, to think through some of those issues. But I think now the community has reached a maturity level to build strong institutions so that we can impact even U.S. policy to Afghanistan. We want an Afghanistan that is open. We want an Afghanistan that's accepting of all ethnic and religious communities. We want an Afghanistan where women have their proper place, where in public life, women have rights, minorities have rights, young people have rights that they've fought for over the past 20 years. These are things that we can all actually impact, but we have to have a level of organization. And so, yes, we can definitely have an impact, but it requires us to be organized. It requires us to have a certain set of values and principles that we work with, and that's where our real impact can be felt. For instance, I'll give you an example of another community. If you look at the Indian American community, they have had such a big impact on U.S.-Indian relationships because they have been organized. They have put together institutions in America, and they're advocating in Congress with the administration to make sure that the U.S. has a strong relationship with India. And we can do that as Afghan as well. It just requires a level of organization and mobilization.
بسیار خوب. بله واقعا قسمی که گفتین در قسمت نفوس شماری، البته در یکی از برنامه ها از در قسمت هم صحبت کردیم که در نفوس شماری باید که چی را انتخاب کنیم تا ما بتونیم که ما هم حساب از البته در افغان کولیشن خانم پوپل میمان ما بودن و این مورد معلومات دادن. و قسمی که آقای ترین گفتن، همه فرزندان ما با ما پابلیک سکول میرن و من خودم منحیث یک معلم در پابلیک سکول میبینم که چقدر تمام پروپوزیشن هایی که است در مورد تعلیم و تربیت، تمام ماده هایی که است، اینا همش بسیار مهم است. باید که تو به اصطلاح چانس نگیریم، کورکورانه که انتخاب نکنیم که کدامش نامی که خوش ما میآید. اگر معلومات نداریم بسیار خوب است که امروی مکاتب فرزندان خود ما به تماس شویم، امروی معلمینشان به تماس شویم، پرسانشان کنیم که کدامشان به نفع مکتب است، کدامشان به خاطری که اصلا حکومت خودش چیزی را انتخاب نمیکنه که به نفع پابلیک ایژوکیشن باشه. امیال وزیر معارف امریکا که خانم بخیالم که بتسی دیووس اسمشان یادم رفته بود است، خودشان اصلا و خانم با پابلیک سکول نرفته، اصلا هیچ تجربه پابلیک سکول نداره و او امروز وزیر معارف است. نمیتونه که هو برای ما شما تصمیم بگیره که در مکاتب ما چی کار است، چی ضرورت است، ولی ووت و رای ما شماست که تغییر را به وجود میاره. ما باید از اون پابلیک اسکولی که فرزند ما میره در اون منطقه که هستیم برای بورد کسی را که انتخاب میکنم باید یک کسی را انتخاب کنیم که با نفع مکتب باشه، بر نفع تعلیم و تربیه باشه، نه چیزی که برایشان گفته شده و دیکته شده باشه که او کار کنن. این چیزاییست که ما شما یعنی به این آواز داریم، باید از اون آواز خود استفاده کنیم، از رأی خود استفاده کنیم، آگاهانه، هوشیارانه و عاقلانه باید که رأی بدیم. آقای ترین، یک دو زنگ تلفن بود، یعنی اگر تلفن آمد میخواین تلفن ها رو جواب بدین یا سوالای خود ما درست است؟
چرا نه؟ هرچی که شما می‌خواستین.
دوستان عزیز، وقتی که تلفن میکنین ببخشین که ما لاینتون نگرفتم، چون وقتی که آقای ترین در خلال صحبت میباشه ما نمیخوایم قطعشان کنم. از او خاطر شما اگر حوصله کنین شاید ما لاینتون هم بگیرم اما صحبت نکنین تا که شما را خوش آمدید نگفتیم. خب آقای ترین، حالا یک انتخابات در راست، آیا رای دادن کدام تفاوت داره؟ آیا کدام تفاوت را میاره که ما رای بتیم یا ندیم؟
مریم جان، I don't want to exaggerate what I'm about to say, but I will tell you that this is the most important election of modern day United States, and it's an election that that will determine which direction America goes to. I remember my father, one of the reasons he brought us to the U.S., and he would tell us this when I was a young child, he would tell us, I brought you here because there is acceptance and freedom. And that was something that's why many of us came to America. We came because there was a level of freedom. There was a level of acceptance of us as immigrants, as Afghans, to be able to express our identity, whether it's a ethnic identity, religious identity, as refugees. We were welcomed to this country to a certain extent because of certain laws, because of certain advocacy of other groups like African Americans and Latino Americans and women's rights groups who worked for many years to pass legislation to allow us as Afghans to come here and other immigrant groups. In my opinion, a lot of that is in jeopardy right now. Many of us, I'm a refugee. I'm a child of refugee parents who had a very successful life in Afghanistan, but unfortunately because of war, they had to come to the United States as refugees. We are now at the lowest number of allowing refugees to come to this country in our history, modern history. We have a group of people who don't look down on immigrants and the contributions of immigrants like us to this country. We have a group of people right now who don't want to see a diverse America, an America where choice and freedom is extremely important. They don't want to see an America that is diverse and accepting of ethnic and faith communities. They don't want to see an America that has a set of principles that allows everyone from everywhere in the world to come and live freely, openly, and integrate, but contribute to the society. And so this vote that will happen in 17 days, in my opinion, is the most important election in modern American history. And I'm not exaggerating. It's two visions of America. And so every single person's vote, if you're a citizen in the United States of America, your vote will count. Your vote matters because there's two visions of America on the election ballot. No election before this, in my lifetime at least, are such stark different visions of America. One is of America that is open, accepting, that empowers people who have been marginalized, women, minorities, people of color, and one that wants to see of America that goes back, white supremacy, to a place that's not accepting and open. And so, yes, every single vote will matter in this election. And I encourage my fellow Afghans, your vote. And I always give a story. I was at a conference in Doha, Qatar, a few years ago. It was a conference on civil rights and voting rights. And I remember there was a older Afghan man who came from Afghanistan, and he was from the rural areas of Afghanistan, and he had 2 fingers of his that were missing. 2 of his fingers were missing. So I sat down with him. I said, "Kakajan," and I had a conversation with him and said, and so we had this conversation.
Wow.
He said, because I voted, they cut my 2 fingers, the tip of my fingers off. But he said, Bachim, even if they were to cut all 10 fingers of mine, I will still vote again. That is the extent that people go to in Afghanistan and other parts of the world to actually vote and give their opinion. We have the freedom and the ability to do that, and it becomes our responsibility to do that. And so I think it will definitely count, and I encourage every one of my fellow Afghan Americans to vote and give their opinion and the stamp of approval or disapproval, whichever way they go.
آقای ترین، یعنی نظرتان برای هموطنای ما که امسال نمیخواین برای رئیس جمهور رای بتن انتخاب کنن چی است؟ مثلا بسیاری کسایی که ما صحبت میکنیم شدیداً مخالف آقای ترامپ هستند، ولی نمیخواین با وجودی که با رئیس جمهور ترامپ اینا مخالف هستند، ولی برای جو بایدن رای نمیتن به خاطری که از او هم خوشش نمیاد. آیا این یک کار درست است و به ضرر همه تمام میشه؟
So, this question, I try to give an answer that makes a very stark comparison. When we're voting, we're not voting for a prophet. We're not voting for a spouse, a husband or wife. We're not voting for someone that is part of our lives. When we're voting for 2 very imperfect person. But what we do is we look at the whole holistic vision of that person. And so if we compare the holistic vision of the 2 people who are running for president in the United States of America today, you will see a very, very different story for each one. One wants to accept people like Afghans to continue to come to America, to feel accepted, to be part of our society, and the other wants to limit it. One is not perfect in his policy towards Afghanistan, but Joe Biden, in my opinion, has people around him that I've dealt with, that I know, people like Anthony Blinken, people like Jake Sullivan, people like Brian McKeon, who are more focused, especially when it comes to Afghanistan, on issues of women's rights, of human rights, of rights of minorities, of maintaining an Afghanistan that's democratic, that's at peace with its neighbors. They have that experience. So for me, I look at the people around Joe Biden and I look at the people around the other candidate. And I can tell you from my experience with them that those people are people who actually listen, who are willing to engage, and we're engaging them right now. We have a group called Afghan Americans for Biden and Harris. And we are talking to them about foreign policy. They are listening to us. We are putting a bit more pressure because we have been able to bring Afghans together. We had a call just 3 days ago, and we had someone from the Biden campaign who came and spoke to us. Next Thursday, we will have another call with a senior Joe Biden foreign policy advisor with a group of Afghan Americans to give them their opinion on what they think about peace and what they think about the role of the U.S. in Afghanistan. So I think that even if you are not voting for the current president, there definitely is room for you to vote for Joe Biden, because there are people around him who are listening, who are smart, who have empathy, who have compassion, and I think those are important. But we're not voting for a prophet. We're not voting for a perfect person. We're not voting for a spouse. We're voting for a candidate that we have to look at their full record and full vision about the future of America and how it impacts Afghanistan as well.
بسیار زیاد تشکر از نظریه و معلومات بسیار وسیعتان و از اینکه شما این گروپ را که تیار کردین و قدر زحمت میکشین و بسیار کار بزرگ است که شما با یعنی اقدر انوالو هستین و اقدر فعالیت میکنین که یک چیز خوب را برای همه انتخاب کنین و با یک کمک بسیار خوب است در راه انتخابات. خب آقای
مریم جان،
بله
ببخشید مریم جان، این گروه که تعیین کردیم it's a historic group. It's the first time an Afghan American group is officially recognized by the campaign. أولين دفعة است. That's never happened by any Republican or Democratic presidential campaign. So it's a historic time for us Afghan Americans, and it's a time that we can build on and continue to grow as a community, regardless of party, whether Republican or Democrat, but we can grow and build hopefully for the future.
بسیار خوبه، بسیار کار اقدام بسیار نیک و بسیار خوبه است که برای اولین بار در تاریخ امریکایی یک گروه افغان‌ها یعنی به رسمیت شناخته شده در این قسمت در فعالیتشان در راه انتخابات، که بسیار یک چیز یک قدم بسیار مثبت خوبه است و امیدوار هستم که همه را با هم یک جا بیاره و آگاهی همه را بلند ببره و تصمیم بهتر و خوبتر را گرفته بتونیم. خب آقای ترین، آیا تفاوت بین دو پارتی وجود داره و همچنان کدام فرق برای افغان ها از چه نگاهی می داشته باشه؟
ولی فرق بسیار کلان است بین دو پارتی به این وقت.
بله.
And I can say, when in the 80s, when we came to, many Afghans came to the United States in the 80s and 90s, but especially in the 80s, there was a Republican president, President Reagan, but it was a president that was welcoming to a refugee community like ours. And that's why many Afghans actually, if we talk to them, they have a very high regard for President Reagan because he welcomed Afghans and he supported Afghanistan. You'll see, so it's not an issue of Afghans having to be partisan. We don't have to be. You don't have to only support one party. Yes, certainly we can do that if we want, but it's a matter of looking at what benefits our communities.
Right.
So Afghan Americans, from a domestic sense, our elders need Social Security. We need healthcare. We need acceptance in society, so our children are not bullied in schools and called terrorists or called foreigners. We want an accepting and open society that accepts us as Afghans, where we have services, where we have where we're able to live in dignity. And we're able to live a life, especially our elderly community. So those are issues, regardless of Afghanistan, they impact our lives in America, our daily lives. For instance, I'll give you a very basic example. I have kids. Many of us have kids, and they are on our health insurance until the age of 26. They're able to be on our health insurance because of the Affordable Care Act. The current administration is trying to repeal that. The current administration wants to cut Social Security and Medicare. How many elderly Afghans do we know that rely on Social Security and Medicare? The Biden administration wants to decrease the age of Social Security, of Medicare, to 60 from 65. how many Afghans will that benefit and allow to live a more comfortable life? So there are real life impacts that this election has on us beyond just the philosophical and foreign policy, but there is real life, everyday life impact that it has on our elders, on our families, on Medicare, on Social Security, on jobs. So it has a real life impact. And so if someone thinks, oh, they're both these people are the same, unfortunately, that's what they said in 2016.
Vale.
How did that turn out?
Vale.
That was Shumadina. How did it turn out? So they're not the same. They are different. There's two different visions in America today. And what benefits, in my opinion, Afghan Americans is that vision of Joe Biden that I was mentioning.
بله خب آقای ترین چرا این انتخابات با انتخابات دیگه متفاوت است؟ آیا انتخابات که در با مو اندازه که مردم میگن آیا مهم است با مو اندازه به نظر شما؟
بله حتما. It's like I said before, this is the most important, at least for me, it is the most important election in my lifetime, and I think in modern American history. I don't think any other election in modern American history is as important because, like I said, there's two visions for America. In America that's open, in America that's welcoming, in America that works with our allies around the world, in America that focuses on values of human rights, of women's rights, of rights of minorities, in America that is welcoming to refugees, in America that our parents, when they came to this, at least my parents, when they came to this country, that's what they were looking for. Because America is not perfect. That's the reality. We have our problems, we have our challenges. But this election is two different visions, and that's why it's so important. That's why when someone says that they are the same, that it's not important, it's like any other election, it is not. It is very different. And if you think the past 4 years have been difficult, I've seen, this is, unfortunately, I do this work every day. It's part of my career. I see the number of hate crimes that have gone up for minority communities. I see the bullying of young children in schools who are called terrorists and foreigners. I see the FBI's hate crimes statistics that have gone up over 1,600% over the past few years in terms of hate crimes against people who are perceived to be Afghan or Arab or South Asian or Middle Eastern or Muslim. I see all of those on a daily basis. That's because of the rhetoric that we hear from senior leadership about people being terrorists or people being extremists or people from Latin America being murderers and rapists and drug dealers. This has real life impact. And sometimes maybe we don't talk to our children about this, but I sit down with my kids and I talk to my kids about this, and it's real. They feel it. My son, who's 18 years old, he will tell me, this is the first time in my life, Baba, that I feel that I'm not feeling as safe as I used to. This is real. Vale, maybe we don't talk to our kids, but this is real.
بله واقعا تو کسایی که یک وقت امو نفرت و تنفر خود در قسمت اقلیت ها پنهان میکردن، در این چند سال آخر متوجه شدیم که بدون ترس و هراس، بدون از اینکه بسیار بی‌تفاوت امو نفرت خود، تبعیض خود نشان میتن، واضح نشان میتن، در جای شک نیست. خب آقای ترین، تفاوت آقای ترامپ و آقای بایدن در مورد افغانستان چی است؟ آیا یکسان است افکارشان؟
So this is a very good question, Mariam Jan.
Okay.
There is differences between the Trump administration and the Biden administration. And specifically, if we look at least from our conversations with the campaign and the administration, what I, at least from the people that I'm working with, we have a set of principles that we'd like for Afghanistan to be dealt with. Because America has been in Afghanistan for almost 2 decades. There has been mistakes made. There has also been gains in Afghanistan. The Afghanistan of 2001 is not the same Afghanistan as 2020. And many of you have gone and reviewed. Of course, there's corruption, there's insecurity, there's a lot of those issues, but there's also a very different Afghanistan. And so, from our perspective as Afghan Americans who are not there, we have a set of principles and values that we want to see in Afghanistan. We want to see a democratic society. We want to see a society that respects women's rights and the freedom of women. We want to see a society that respects the rights of minorities and youth and young people. And so, talking to the Biden campaign and the current administration, I do believe that Vice President Biden views those issues as important. At least the people around him have told us. As they engage us, they have told us that those will be integral parts of moving forward, whether it's with the peace process with the Taliban or whether with the government of Afghanistan. But these issues will be on the table, and that we will not make a hasty decision whether to leave Afghanistan. But we will ensure that it's thought through, because yes, Americans want their troops to come home, and yes, we want an end to the war. We want a peace that is sustainable, but it should have a certain set of values like that we talked about before. So I do think that there is a difference between the two candidates on the issue of Afghanistan, and I believe that the values and principles that at least our groups think is important is something that Joe Biden has.
بسیار خوب. خب آقای ترین اگر لطف کنین بگوین که دیگه چی کرده میتونیم که ما انوالو باشیم، حصه بگیریم در قسمت مراحل سیاسی و سیویک شهروندی و در مورد روند مدنی و سیاسی چی کرده میتونیم؟
I would think, Mariam, the first thing is to try to educate ourselves. And I think that's really important. For a democracy to function and function well, the people who are in that society need to be informed, need to know the issues. And I know it's difficult. It's not easy. Those of us who do this for a living, we know we are involved in it. But everybody has jobs, has families, have a life, and they can't sit down and read, and unfortunately the news is so sensational that it doesn't inform us well. But I think one of the things that maybe we can do, and we're planning to do, inshallah, slowly, is to create workshops and campaigns to help our fellow Afghan Americans understand issues better, understand the system better. And so if they can read about the process of democracy and civic engagement in the U.S., what local government does, what state government does. And we're going to make these material available in both Dari, Pashto, and in English, and we'll have this material that we can get out to folks to inform themselves about the civic process. Get involved in campaigns, not just presidential campaigns. Right now, there are people who are involved in the presidential campaign, but every 2 years, there's members of Congress are looking for volunteers to help them. Encourage your kids to volunteer on a campaign, or you yourself can go and volunteer to make phone calls, to learn about the candidate, to express to them, just for them to know that there's an Afghan American who cares and who's on the campaign. That is such a important step for them to understand who Afghans are. So volunteering on campaigns, being part of local organizations like our Parent-Teacher Association. If your child's school has a Parent-Teacher Association, be involved in it. Just basic things. And I think what we will do, at least those of us in institutions, hopefully as we're building now, we're going to try to help educate our fellow Afghans about the process, but they can also get involved, like I said, at the local level and at the campaigns. Now there's 17 days if you want to get involved. You can reach out to me. I can provide my email address. I will connect you to the campaign. You can make phone calls, send emails, write postcards. There's a lot that can be done in the next 17 days.
بسیار خوب. خب در این انتخابات و یا هر انتخاباتی که باشه کدام موضوعات برای افغان ها مهم است به کدام چیزا باید ما زیادتر توجه کنیم و برای افغان ها و برای اقلیت ها کدام موضوعات در انتخابات و انتخاباتی که باشه یعنی بسیار مهم است.
But so I look at it for two different parts. There's a domestic policy that impact our lives as Afghan Americans every day, and then there's foreign policy. On the domestic side, we are a community that needs certain services, and we need to make sure that those services are there. Our elders, our seniors, young people. There are issues like Medicare, Social Security, healthcare, college tuition. Young Afghan Americans who need to go to college, we don't want them to leave college with $100,000 in debt or $200,000 in debt. We want them to be able to go to college, get a college education, and come out and be successful and not worry about so much debt that they would have to. So these are issues: Medicare, Social Security, that impact our elders. A lot of Afghan are small business owners. We want to make sure that they think about, especially during COVID, which administration will have a plan to help rebuild some of these small businesses that many Afghan Americans, like restaurants and other businesses that our community is very much involved in. So those issues we need to think about from a domestic policy. From foreign policy is we need to look at how much investment our government is going to make in Afghanistan in terms of aid. Even if they bring back our troops, but we at least will be engaged with Afghanistan in the long term. We want to make sure we're investing in peace, we're investing in development, in women's rights, in the rights of minorities. We need to see which candidate has positions on these issues so that in Afghanistan that is stable, that is secure, and Afghan Americans can play that bridge between America and Afghanistan so well. So those are the issues that I would say we need to think about.
بسیار خوب. خب آقای ترین برای 19 اکتبر فکر میکنم روز آخر هست که میتونن کس رجیستر کنه برای رای دادن بله؟
But it depends which state they're in as well, so it differs with each state. Yes.
اما تنهای ما که مثلا کهن سال هستن سنشان بلند است باید زبان نمیفهمن آیا سهولت های برشان است که اینا بتونن که اینا هم از موقع شهروندی خود استفاده کنن رای بتن نظر شما چی است که کدام راه خوب است که برشان آسان بسازیم که ضرور است که هر کسی که از 18 تا به هر سن بلندی که می باشه خدا نخواسته اگر کسی بسیار در بستر مریضی هم باشه ما میتونیم اونا را کمک کنیم که رای بتن در قسمت اگر لطف کنیم صحبت کنیم
Atman, definitely. So there's a few things that can be done. And we can try to be as helpful and make it easy for, especially for our elderly who don't speak the language and who might need help and access. So first thing is if they're able to go to the voting, if they know that they're registered, they can go to the polling station. The polling station generally has different languages, especially in places like
California. شاید به خاطر کووید بسیاری از ترس نروانی. از اون نگام keep that in mind, please.
They're also then able to ask for a mail-in ballot.
Vale.
So what we can do is, if you'd like, and maybe I can send you the list, and one of your next shows you can put it on online. Is they can go to their Secretary of State's website of the state. So whether it's California or Virginia or New York or New Jersey or anywhere else, Texas. They can go to the website of the Secretary of State and request a mail-in ballot. And all states will then send them one. They can fill it out. And a few states, most of them will also allow them to send that mail-in ballot as long as it's postmarked before the elections. They can, some states will allow that. But they can go to the website of the Secretary of State of the state that they live in, request a mail-in ballot, and send it back. If they're able to go to the polling station, if they can't take someone with them, what they can do is I can give my email address. There are organizations that can help accompany them, translate for them, take them to the polling station, and actually help them vote and then take them back home. I can give you that information. They can, your guests can then request that, and we will put them in touch with those organizations to take them, help translate for them, and at the same time bring them back so it can facilitate and make it easy for them.
بسیار خوب دوستان عزیز، اگر ضرورت داشته باشین ایمیل ما روی صفحه تلویزیون است mir@gmail.com. میتونین به من ایمیل کنین و من ایمیل آقای ترین به اختیارتان میگذارم. و آقای ترین، یک سوال آخری در قسمت میل کردن هم بسیار کوتاه بگین چون وقت تمام شده. باید متوجه باشیم که میل فراد هم زیاد است که به جای درست چه قسم به کجا میل کنیم که یعنی دست نخوره، کدام یعنی از بین نره، تغییر نکنه، یعنی در قسمت هم کدام نظر دارین؟
But the first thing is there's not a lot of mail voting fraud. Unfortunately, that is something that the president has said, which is not really factual. There's not a lot of fraud, but just to be to be careful. If someone is voting by mail, if they are voting by mail, the best thing to do is to take it to the post office and drop it off at the post.
Vale.
Then that we can ensure that after that it will be taken care of by the postal system. That's how I voted, because right now I live in Virginia. I'm a resident of Virginia. I'm currently in California. I requested a mail-in ballot. I got it. I filled it out. I took it to the post office in California, sent it, and then you can even track it on the website online as well. So that is the best way to do that, to feel secure.
بسیار زیاد تشکر آقای ترین از وقت گرانبهایتان، از معلومات بسیار خوب و وسیعتان و از اینکه بسیار یعنی بسیار به زودی حاضر آماده شدین که همراه ما همکاری کنین. بسیار زیاد تشکر از لطفتان. موفقیت‌های بیشترتان خواهان هستم و 2 هفته آینده باز شما را می‌بینیم با دکتر صاحب نادی هاشمی و مهمان دیگه ما فرشته جان.
زنده باشم.
تشکر. خب دوستان عزیز ارجمند، بسیار تشکر از اینکه برنامه امروز هم دیدین و اگر هم با سوالای برای آقای ترین در مورد انتخابات با یا رای دادن دارین که کدام معلوماتی که چیزی که در مورد صحبت نشده باشه میخواین خواستار معلومات باشین به من ایمیل کنین. من انشالله که ایمیلایتان به آقای ترین میرسانم و امیدوار هستم که همه ما شما بتانیم که در این انتخابات بسیار تاریخی که در سطح جهانی بسیار یک انتخابات مهم و ضروری و اساسی است بریم و رای بدیم و اگر راجستر نیستین هنوز هم میتونین هرچی زودتر خود راجستر کنین. و با تشکر مجدد از محترم آقای ترین و همکار عزیزم برنامه امروز به همینجا به پایان میرسانم. تا هفته آینده خداوندیارا مددگارتان. خداحافظ. و شما بینندگان عزیز هم جهان سپاس که همیشه من همراهی میکنین.
توانا بود ارکی دانا بود ز دانش دل پیر برنا بود.